The plane was filled with the usual sounds of travelers finding their seats and settling in for the long journey ahead, and there was a quiet hum of conversation and the faint rustle of luggage when suddenly a loud, piercing cry broke through the calm, and all heads turned toward the source of the noise. In the first-class section, a baby was screaming non-stop, kicking tiny legs and waving small arms in frustration, and the mother, a wealthy woman named Clara, looked overwhelmed as she tried one solution after another to calm the child. She held the baby close, bounced gently, tried feeding, whispered comforting words, offered toys, and even leaned back to rock the chair, but nothing seemed to work, and with each minute the baby's wailing grew louder and more desperate. Passengers around her frowned and shifted in their seats, some glancing at their watches, some sighing heavily, and a few whispered complaints under their breath. But Clara could not escape the embarrassment of feeling that everyone's patience was running thin. The flight attendants moved quietly past the rows, offering polite smiles and asking if anything could be done, but their hands were tied because the baby would not stop, and the mother appeared exhausted and anxious, her cheeks flushed with frustration and worry. Even the usually composed business travelers frowned as their concentration broke and the sound of a crying baby became impossible to ignore, filling the cabin with tension that spread like a wave over every passenger, from first class to the back of the plane. In the economy section, seated a few rows behind the chaos, a young boy named Malik noticed the scene from his window seat, his dark eyes attentive and focused as he observed not only the crying child but also the reactions of the people around him. Malik was traveling alone with a small, worn backpack slung over one shoulder, and he carried himself with quiet confidence that came from growing up in a humble neighborhood where he had learned to stay calm under pressure and to see solutions where others saw only problems. His curiosity was piqued as he wondered why the baby could not be soothed and why the mother, despite her wealth and access to all the resources, seemed unable to calm her own child. He thought carefully about the problem and observed the baby's movements, the way the cries escalated, and the mother's gestures and expressions, forming a small plan in his mind while remaining unnoticed by other passengers who were too busy complaining or trying to ignore the disturbance. Malik's calm nature and observant mind set him apart from the adults around him. While most were caught in frustration, irritation, or embarrassment, he was focused and thoughtful, seeking to understand rather than judge. He watched Clara offer toys, try lullabies, and rock the chair, and he noticed how each attempt made the baby respond briefly but then cry again. Malik realized that the child did not need more material comfort but rather needed connection, attention, and a gentle presence that spoke directly to the child's fear and confusion about the unfamiliar environment of the plane. He imagined himself as a bridge between the baby and the mother, someone who could help the baby feel safe without replacing the mother but simply offering a calm influence. With quiet determination, Malik slid out of his seat, keeping his movements slow and deliberate so as not to startle anyone, and began making his way toward the first-class section. The cabin crew noticed him and gave a polite nod, assuming he might be trying to find the restroom or locate a parent, but they did not suspect that a small boy could be the solution to the loud chaos that had been consuming everyone's attention. As he walked past rows of passengers, some glanced at him curiously, noting the confidence in his step despite his young age, and a few smiled quietly, recognizing that there was something different about this boy, a presence that seemed steady and reassuring in contrast to the tension around them. Malik reached the edge of first class and paused for a moment to take in the scene. Clara was kneeling beside the seat, holding the baby, who continued to scream in frustration, tears rolling down the small cheeks, eyes wide with discomfort, and tiny fists pounding against the air. The passengers seated nearby looked weary and annoyed, some staring at the ceiling or turning to their phones in an attempt to escape the overwhelming noise, and Malik understood that in that moment he had to be gentle, careful, and deliberate. He remembered the lessons his family had taught him about empathy, patience, and courage, about seeing beyond appearances and understanding people and children for who they truly are rather than what they seem to be. He took a slow step forward, smiling faintly at the baby, making eye contact and lowering himself to the baby's level, understanding instinctively that connection begins with trust and calm presence. Clara noticed Malik and raised an eyebrow, surprised to see a young boy approach so calmly. There was something in Malik's demeanor, a quiet confidence and a soft smile, that immediately caught her attention, and despite the stress of the situation, she could not help but wonder if perhaps this boy could offer something she had not tried. Malik reached into his backpack and gently pulled out a small toy, not flashy or expensive, just something simple, colorful, and soft, and extended it toward the baby with careful hands. He whispered softly, A simple melodic sound, gentle and steady, and the baby's crying paused for a brief moment as curiosity flickered across the small face. Malik's voice did not demand attention but invited it, offering comfort without pressure, and slowly he began to hum a quiet tune he had learned from his grandmother, a melody that was soothing, rhythmic, and familiar in its warmth. Passengers nearby leaned slightly forward in surprise as they saw the baby's small fists relax and the crying begin to soften. Clara looked astonished, unable to believe that a boy she did not know could capture her baby's attention when all her efforts had failed. Malik continued to hum softly and sway the toy gently, his presence calm and focused, creating a small bubble of peace in the midst of the plane's earlier chaos. Other passengers turned to watch as tension gave way to curiosity, some whispering to one another, some smiling quietly at the unexpected scene unfolding before them, and a feeling of calm slowly began to settle over the cabin, replacing irritation and exhaustion with amazement and hope. Malik understood that the key was not force or distraction but presence, patience, and a simple connection. The baby's eyes followed him, small hands reaching tentatively toward the toy, and slowly, hesitantly, a tiny smile appeared as the wailing turned into coos and soft gurgles. Clara felt a mix of relief and awe, watching this small boy transform the mood of her child and, indirectly, of the passengers around them. Malik did not rush, did not demand compliance, but allowed the baby to explore comfort in his own way, offering support without intrusion, and in that moment, it became clear that wealth, toys, or status could never replace the power of empathy, understanding, and genuine care. As the plane continued its ascent, the cabin gradually settled into a new rhythm. The crying had stopped, replaced with quiet laughter and soft coos, and Clara looked at Malik with a newfound respect, recognizing that this boy's gift was rare and precious. Passengers who had been tense now exchanged glances and small smiles, appreciating the unexpected lesson in kindness and presence. Malik remained humble, quietly humming, gently offering the toy and making sure the baby was calm, while the adults watched and learned silently, amazed at the way a young boy from a modest background could bring such comfort in a situation that had seemed impossible just moments ago. Malik stayed calm as he knelt beside the baby, keeping his voice soft and gentle, and his smile warm and reassuring, and the baby's eyes widened as they met his, and for the first time since the plane had taken off. The crying began to falter just slightly, and Malik slowly reached into his small backpack, pulling out a simple, colorful toy that was not flashy or expensive but soft and easy for tiny hands to grasp, and he offered it to the baby with careful, steady movements that did not startle or scare but invited the child to reach and explore, and the baby paused in surprise, looking at Malik's extended hand and the toy, and then back at the boy's face, and a tiny spark of curiosity lit in the child's eyes. And Malik began to hum a soft tune, a simple melody that he had learned from his grandmother, a tune that carried warmth and calm and familiarity, even in a strange environment, and the baby's small fists unclenched, and a faint coo escaped the lips, capturing the attention of Clara, who watched in astonishment, unable to believe that a young boy had already managed to quiet the noise that had filled the cabin with tension for so long. And Malik continued to hum, keeping the rhythm steady and the tone gentle, and the baby's eyes followed the toy, reaching out slowly, then pulling back, then reaching again, and the small coos grew into soft giggles, and Clara could not help but smile, her stress and frustration melting into amazement and gratitude as she realized that this boy was doing something that no amount of money or fancy toy could achieve. And Malik's calm presence seemed to reassure not only the baby but the adults around them as well, and the other passengers leaned slightly forward in their seats, whispering to one another, noting the sudden change in the atmosphere from irritation to curiosity and admiration, and some passengers even smiled broadly at the unexpected sight of a young boy sitting with a millionaire's baby, coaxing a smile from the child with nothing but patience and empathy. And the cabin crew, who had been hovering nearby, glanced at each other with subtle nods, silently acknowledging the rare skill and instinct Malik displayed as he interacted with the baby, keeping the motions gentle and the humming continuous, and the toy swaying slowly back and forth in perfect timing with the melody, and the baby's giggles grew into laughter, a light, airy sound that filled the space between the rows of seats, softening the tension and bringing smiles to the faces of those who had just moments ago been annoyed and restless. And Malik adjusted his posture slightly, leaning closer without crowding, his eyes kind and reassuring, and Clara, still kneeling beside him, watched as her baby reached up and touched the toy and then Malik's hand, the first sign of connection she had seen since the flight began, and she felt a wave of relief mixed with awe, realizing that something special was happening, and the baby's giggles continued, growing louder and more joyful, and the passengers who had been so focused on their discomfort now observed quietly, some leaning back in their seats, some whispering compliments to each other about the boy and his kindness and the way he seemed to understand the baby in a way that adults had struggled to do. And Malik kept humming, soft and steady, his eyes flicking briefly to Clara with a modest smile and a shrug that seemed to say it was nothing, just trying to help. And the baby now laughed freely, kicking little legs in the air and reaching for the toy again and again. And the mother's heart swelled with gratitude and wonder, and she whispered quietly, asking Malik how he had managed to calm her child when nothing else had worked. And Malik answered simply, saying he had tried to make the baby feel safe and happy, and that sometimes children only needed gentle attention and a calm presence. And Clara nodded, impressed and grateful for the wisdom in his words, and for the way he had transformed her stressful flight into a peaceful and joyful experience. And other passengers began to notice the small changes in behavior around the cabin, the tense expressions relaxing into quiet smiles, the whispered complaints replaced with soft laughter and interest, and the cabin crew moved with ease, their previous concern replaced with a sense of calm and order as the baby's cries had finally stopped completely, and in their place was laughter and soft cooing, and the entire section seemed lighter and more peaceful. And Clara realized that this young boy, traveling alone and from a modest background, possessed a natural gift for empathy and connection that money could not buy. And the sight of Malik sitting beside her baby, humming gently, swaying the toy and making the baby laugh filled her with a mixture of relief, respect, and admiration. And she began to observe the passengers around her, noticing how even the most impatient travelers had softened, how children watched in fascination, and how the adults seemed quietly inspired by Malik's actions. And the boy's gentle humility made the entire scene even more remarkable, as he did not boast or demand attention, but simply offered care, presence, and patience. And the baby's eyes never left Malik, tiny hands reaching again for the toy and then resting briefly on Malik's knee. And Clara realized that her child had already formed a bond with this boy, a connection built on trust, comfort, and understanding. And she thought about how quickly a small act of kindness could change an entire environment, how one child had transformed not only her baby's mood but the atmosphere of the cabin itself, turning tension into curiosity, annoyance into admiration. And she felt a deep sense of gratitude for Malik and the lesson he had silently taught her about empathy, patience, and the power of presence. And the baby, still giggling and reaching, seemed to understand the boy's intentions, responding instinctively to the calm energy and kind attention. And Malik continued his gentle humming, his movements slow and deliberate, ensuring the baby remained relaxed and joyful. And the passengers, observing in silence, began to whisper to one another, some taking mental notes on the boy's methods, others simply enjoying the rare sight of pure connection unfolding before their eyes. And Clara, still holding her baby, felt a sense of peace and awe as she watched Malik's quiet, humble confidence, and she silently thanked him for showing her the value of kindness, calm, and patience in a world where so many relied on money and power to solve problems. And Malik, oblivious to the attention, simply focused on the baby, humming softly, swaying the toy, and keeping the connection alive, demonstrating in a simple yet profound way how compassion and presence could transform even the most stressful situation. And by the time the plane reached cruising altitude, the cabin had shifted completely from tension to calm, and the passengers, previously annoyed or distracted, now watched quietly, smiling and exchanging impressed glances at the unexpected young hero who had changed everything. With patience, a toy, a melody, and a kind heart. After several minutes of calm, Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her as the baby continued to coo and giggle in response to Malik's gentle humming and the small toy he held, and she realized that this young boy had done what no amount of effort or expensive gadgets could achieve, and she could not help but smile and invite Malik to sit closer so he could continue interacting with her child in a safe and comfortable way. And Malik politely accepted the invitation, sliding onto the edge of the seat beside Clara, while keeping his movements slow and careful so as not to overwhelm the baby. And the passengers around them watched in quiet amazement, whispering softly about the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. And the baby's attention was entirely on Malik, tiny hands reaching out repeatedly toward the toy, and then resting briefly on Malik's knee. And Clara felt a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and wonder, because in that moment she understood that this boy had a rare gift, a natural ability to connect with children and make them feel safe, happy, and understood. And Malik, humble as ever, continued humming, swaying the toy gently, and occasionally smiling at the baby, never demanding attention or recognition. and Clara found herself watching him closely, noticing the way he maintained calm, patience and focus, qualities that seemed far beyond his years, and she thought about how many times she had relied on money, status, or material things to solve problems, and yet none of that could compare to the simple, heartfelt effort that Malik offered so freely, and the baby's laughter grew louder and more joyful with every passing minute, and the other passengers in first class, who had initially been tense and annoyed, now leaned forward to watch, some smiling openly, some whispering softly to their neighbors, and even the flight attendants paused in their duties to observe the extraordinary bond that was forming between the young boy and the child, and Malik occasionally glanced at Clara with a polite smile, acknowledging her presence and silently communicating that he was happy to help and did not need praise or reward, and Clara, touched by his humility, offered him a small snack from her bag, a granola bar, but Malik politely declined, shaking his head and saying softly that he was already happy because the baby was calm and happy, and she felt her heart swell with admiration and respect for his character, and she realized that his joy came not from material gifts or recognition but from the simple act of helping someone in need. And as the plane continued its ascent, the baby's playful energy began to grow, and Malik adapted seamlessly, engaging with the child, showing how to hold the toy gently, swaying it slowly, and introducing small variations in the melody he hummed to keep the baby interested and entertained, and Clara observed how intuitive he was, how he understood the baby's reactions and moods instantly, and responded in a way that made the child feel secure and comfortable, and other passengers continued to watch in quiet fascination, noting how a small, humble boy had transformed a stressful and tense environment into one filled with calm, laughter, and admiration. And Clara reflected on the contrast between her life, filled with wealth and resources, and Malik's life, which seemed simple yet rich in compassion, empathy, and understanding, and she felt humbled by the realization that true richness lay not in money but in the ability to give, to comfort, and to connect with others in meaningful ways. And the baby, now laughing freely, reached out repeatedly for Malik's hand and the toy, showing that trust and connection had already formed. And Clara, smiling, whispered softly to Malik, thanking him for his kindness and asking how he had learned to be so gentle and patient, and Malik answered simply, saying that he had learned from his family, from experiences in his neighborhood, and from paying attention to others, that patience, kindness, and understanding could change people's lives. And Clara listened intently, inspired by the wisdom and maturity that this young boy displayed, and the passengers around them, inspired by the scene, began to reflect on their own actions and attitudes, noticing that tension, frustration, and impatience could be replaced by calm, attention, and care if one took the time and effort to understand and connect with others. And Malik continued to engage with the baby, introducing small games, like clapping hands together, tapping the toy gently, and making soft rhythmic sounds with his mouth that delighted the child and elicited bursts of laughter. And Clara watched, amazed at the creativity and resourcefulness he displayed despite being so young, and the baby's laughter grew contagious, spreading through the cabin like a gentle wave, softening even the most annoyed or tired passengers. And Clara began to realize that this experience was teaching her a valuable lesson, one she had never learned from money or power, and that the presence of Malik, humble, patient, and kind, was more valuable than any wealth she could provide. And she silently thanked him for showing her the power of empathy and the beauty of small, meaningful acts of care and kindness. And Malik, aware of the attention but undistracted, kept his focus entirely on the baby, watching every movement, responding with a gentle touch, a soft hum, and a patient smile. And the passengers continued to watch quietly, some leaning back in their seats with soft smiles, some whispering admiration to each other, and the flight attendants nodded subtly to each other, silently acknowledging the boy's extraordinary ability to transform a stressful situation with nothing more than kindness, patience, and attention. And Clara, holding her baby close, realized that this moment would stay with her forever, the memory of a young boy who had brought peace and joy into their lives without expecting anything in return. And she felt a deep sense of humility, knowing that her wealth could never create such a bond, and she resolved to remember Malik's lesson in empathy and presence in all areas of her life. And the baby, giggling and reaching for Malik, continued to play, coo, and laugh, and Malik continued to hum, sway the toy, and respond with soft laughter and gentle gestures. And the cabin had transformed completely, the atmosphere peaceful, joyful, and inspired, a testament to the extraordinary power of empathy, patience, and the humble heart of a young boy who had shown everyone that even the smallest actions could have the greatest impact. And Clara watched silently, amazed, smiling, and grateful, knowing that the flight that had begun with chaos had turned into a journey of joy. On that plane. As the plane settled into its steady cruising altitude, Clara finally allowed herself to relax, feeling the tension of the past hour melting away, and she noticed how Malik continued to engage with her baby, not with any sense of hurry or pressure but with patience and care that seemed to flow naturally, and the baby, now giggling and cooing happily, reached for Malik's small hands, responding with trust and delight, and Clara watched in awe as the young boy instinctively understood the baby's moods, adjusting his voice, movements, and the gentle rocking of the toy to keep the child calm and entertained, and Malik's focus never wavered, even as passengers nearby glanced curiously or offered soft smiles of admiration, and Clara thought about the contrast between her own life, filled with wealth and resources, and Malik's life, which seemed simple yet full of wisdom, compassion, and empathy, and she realized that while she had always believed that money could solve problems, Malik had shown her that patience, presence, and understanding were far more powerful than any material solution, and the baby laughed freely, kicking tiny legs and clapping small hands, and Malik encouraged the play, humming softly, creating a melody that felt both soothing and playful at the same time, and Clara, watching this interaction, felt her heart swell with gratitude and wonder, realizing that this young boy was teaching her a lesson she could never have learned from books or tutors or even her own experiences in the world of wealth and privilege. And the passengers around them began to notice subtle changes in themselves, the tension in their shoulders easing, the frowns fading into smiles, and the soft sounds of coos and laughter spreading a contagious sense of calm throughout the cabin, and Clara turned her attention back to Malik, and began asking him questions, curious about his background, how he had learned to be so patient and kind, and Malik answered modestly, explaining that he had grown up in a small neighborhood where helping others was a part of life, where observing and understanding people and situations taught him how to act with care and empathy, and Clara listened intently, impressed by his humility, wisdom, and the maturity that shone through his quiet words and gentle actions, and Malik explained that he had learned from his family to be observant, to notice small signs of discomfort or need, and to respond in ways that created comfort and trust, and Clara nodded, feeling inspired by the young boy's perspective, realizing that the simple lessons of life often held the deepest truths, and she reflected on how her own child had responded immediately to Malik's presence, laughter replacing tears, trust replacing fear, and she felt a renewed sense of gratitude for the boy who had brought calm and joy into a moment that had seemed impossible to manage. And Malik, aware of the baby's reactions, continued to hum, sway the toy, and interact gently, introducing small variations in sound and movement that kept the baby engaged and curious, and Clara noticed that even the smallest gestures, the tiniest changes in tone or motion, elicited delighted reactions from the baby, and she felt both awe and appreciation for Malik's skill and intuition, and the cabin, once tense and uneasy, now felt light, calm, and harmonious, and other passengers, inspired by the young boy's quiet courage and kind heart, began to offer small acts of friendliness to each other, sharing smiles, soft words, and laughter, and Clara reflected on the ripple effect that Malik had created, transforming not only her child's mood but the energy and attitude of everyone around them, and she felt a deep sense of humility, realizing that wealth and status could not create such harmony, and that true impact came from care, empathy, and presence. And Malik continued his gentle interaction, showing the baby how to wave hands, clap softly, and respond to simple rhythms, and the baby's laughter became more musical, more confident, reaching out with small hands to touch Malik's toy and hands, forming a connection that seemed natural and unforced. And Clara watched, her heart full, thinking about how lucky her child was to meet someone like Malik, how extraordinary it was for a boy so young and humble to teach such important lessons about kindness, empathy, and patience in a single, quiet moment on a plane. And the other passengers whispered among themselves, commenting softly about how remarkable it was that such a small act of compassion could change the entire atmosphere of the flight, and the flight attendants moved around with ease, noting how the calm and laughter had replaced complaints and tension, and Clara felt grateful not only for Malik, but also for the chance to witness a real-life example of the power of presence, patience, and empathy. And Malik, completely absorbed in helping the baby, continued to smile softly, hum, and sway the toy, never seeking attention or reward, simply enjoying the happiness he could create. And the baby, now reaching out and interacting more confidently, seemed to understand that Malik's attention and care were genuine, and that trust and joy could be shared freely without expectation or pressure. And Clara reflected on her own life, realizing how often she relied on material solutions to solve problems, and how Malik had demonstrated that true impact came from the heart and the mind, from observing, understanding, and responding with kindness and insight. And the passengers, quietly observing, continued to notice the changes around them, smiling softly at the unexpected lesson in humanity and the beauty of small acts of care. And Clara realized that this moment would stay with her forever. The image of Malik, humble, kind, patient, and attentive, bringing calm and joy to her child, and inspiring those who witnessed it, and she felt a renewed determination to teach her child the same lessons about empathy, patience, and the value of presence that Malik had demonstrated so naturally. And Malik, still engaged with the baby, began introducing small, playful movements, showing the baby how to gently touch the toy and respond to rhythms in a playful yet calming way. And the baby responded with giggles and coos, delightfully exploring the world with Malik as guide. And Clara continued to observe quietly, noticing how the boy adapted instantly to each reaction of the baby, how he remained calm even if the baby moved suddenly or showed excitement, and how he never lost patience or focus. And the cabin was filled with quiet joy, the soft sound of the baby's laughter, Malik's humming, and the gentle smiles of the passengers who had been touched by the scene. And Clara, holding her child close, thought about how rare it was to meet someone like Malik, how a single act of empathy could ripple outward, affecting not just one person but many. And she felt a deep sense of appreciation, realizing that the value of human connection, patience, and understanding far outweighed any material possessions or wealth she had ever known. And Malik, seeing that the baby was content and joyful, finally leaned back slightly, allowing Clara to interact more directly, but still humming softly and offering the gentle guidance that had created such a transformation. And the baby laughed and reached out repeatedly, showing trust and delight. And Clara smiled, feeling a profound lesson in gratitude, empathy, and the quiet power of small, meaningful actions. And the plane, once tense with cries and frustration, now felt peaceful, harmonious, and filled with soft laughter, a testament to the extraordinary impact that one humble, kind-hearted boy could have on an entire space. And Clara vowed silently to remember Malik's lessons, to value patience, presence, and empathy, and to carry the memory of this flight and the extraordinary boy who had taught her so much in her heart for the rest of her life. And the baby, content and happy, continued to explore the toy, reach for Malik's hands, and laugh freely. And Malik, humble and calm, continued to guide and hum, a quiet hero in a moment that would leave a lasting impression on everyone present. As the flight continued smoothly, Clara felt a sense of calm she had not expected, watching her baby play happily with Malik and realizing that the boy's presence had turned a stressful situation into one of joy and learning. And she noticed how Malik's confidence and kindness seemed to inspire the entire cabin, how passengers who had been tense or impatient now exchanged quiet smiles, some even whispering softly to each other about the boy who had changed the atmosphere. And Malik, still humming gently, introduced small, playful gestures, tapping the toy lightly and moving it in ways that made the baby laugh and reach eagerly. And Clara marveled at his patience, how he adjusted instantly to the baby's reactions, how he understood the child's needs without being told, how he responded with warmth, attentiveness, and intuition. And she reflected on the lessons she was learning from this young boy, lessons about empathy, presence, and the quiet power of caring for someone without expecting reward. And the baby laughed freely, kicking tiny legs and waving small hands, reaching for Malik's toy and fingers. And Malik encouraged each action, responding to every coo and giggle with a soft smile and gentle tone. And the passengers around them watched quietly, inspired by the small act of kindness that had grown into a display of patience, love, and connection. And Clara realized how rare it was to meet someone like Malik, someone whose actions reflected true empathy, humility, and a sense of understanding beyond his years. And she began to ask him questions, softly, curious about his life, where he had learned to be so attentive, so kind, so patient. And Malik answered modestly, explaining that he had grown up in a neighborhood where people looked out for each other, where observing, listening, and responding with care were part of everyday life. And Clara listened intently, impressed by the wisdom and humility that shone through his quiet words and gentle actions. And she felt a sense of deep gratitude for his presence, realizing that her child had learned a lesson in trust and calm that no amount of wealth or training could provide. And Malik continued to play with the baby, introducing small rhythms, clapping lightly, tapping the toy, and humming variations of the melody that had soothed the child earlier. And the baby responded eagerly, cooing and laughing, exploring each new sound and movement with delight. And Clara observed how naturally Malik adapted to the baby's moods, how he kept the child engaged without ever forcing anything. How he maintained patience even if the baby became excited or restless, and she felt a profound sense of admiration for the boy's instincts, kindness, and quiet courage. And the cabin, once tense with frustration and cries, was now filled with laughter, smiles, and a soft sense of harmony, and the passengers, witnessing the remarkable bond forming before them, seemed quietly inspired, reflecting on the value of empathy, patience, and human connection. And Clara thought about the contrast between her world of wealth and privilege and Malik's world of modest means and yet rich in life lessons, where kindness, patience, and presence were more powerful than any material possession. And Malik, noticing that the baby was content and joyful, leaned back slightly, still humming softly, allowing Clara to interact more with her child while he maintained a calm, guiding presence. And the baby giggled, reaching out repeatedly for Malik's toy and fingers, showing trust and delight, and Clara felt a deep sense of appreciation for the boy, realizing that his actions had created not only peace and joy for her child, but also a lesson she would carry in her heart forever. And the flight attendants moved about the cabin more easily now, noting the absence of cries and tension, and observing the calm that had spread throughout the plane, and Clara watched, thinking about how one small act of compassion, patience, and attention could ripple outward, affecting not just her child but the energy and mood of everyone around them. And Malik, still fully attentive, introduced gentle games, showing the baby how to clap softly, wave, and respond to rhythms, all in a playful and calming way. And the baby responded eagerly, laughing, cooing, and reaching for Malik, forming a bond of trust, safety, and joy that Clara knew would stay with her child long after the flight ended. And she reflected on her own life, realizing how often she had relied on wealth to solve problems, and now understanding that true impact came from the heart, from presence, and from observing and understanding others with empathy and care. And the passengers continued to watch quietly, smiling softly, inspired by Malik's humility, patience, and skill. And Clara thought about how remarkable it was that a young boy, traveling alone, had transformed an entire environment with nothing more than kindness, attention, and gentle care. And Malik, seeing that the baby was content, continued to hum, sway the toy, and encourage interaction, never seeking recognition, reward, or praise, simply offering joy and comfort. And the baby laughed freely, explored the toy, and reached for Malik's hands repeatedly, showing that trust and happiness had been established. And Clara, holding her child, thought about the extraordinary impact one person could have when acting with care, patience, and empathy, realizing that the most meaningful lessons in life often come from simple, heartfelt actions. And the cabin was quiet yet joyful, filled with soft laughter, smiles, and a subtle sense of peace. And Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude for Malik, knowing that she had witnessed something rare and special, a lesson in kindness, presence, and human connection that would remain with her forever. And Malik, still engaged, continued to respond to every coo, laugh, and movement of the baby with gentle guidance, soft humming, and playful attention, creating a safe and joyful environment for the child. And Clara thought about how she could carry these lessons into her own life, teaching her child the same values of empathy, patience, and kindness that Malik had demonstrated. And the passengers, inspired by the boy's actions, began to share quiet smiles and gestures of friendliness with one another, creating a ripple effect of calm and goodwill throughout the cabin. And Clara, holding her baby, reflected on the lesson of humility, understanding that despite her wealth, the true richness lay in the ability to connect, to care, and to offer attention and empathy freely. And Malik, seeing the baby joyful and relaxed, finally leaned back slightly, still humming softly, his presence calm and steady, allowing Clara and her child to interact more directly while maintaining the trust and connection he had established. And the baby reached out eagerly, showing delight, confidence, and curiosity. And Clara smiled, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and wonder, knowing that this moment, this boy, and this lesson in empathy, patience, and love would remain with her and her child forever. And the plane, once filled with tension and frustration, was now harmonious, joyful, and peaceful, a testament to the extraordinary power of compassion and kindness. And Clara silently vowed to carry Malik's lessons in her heart, sharing them with her child and remembering always the humble boy who had changed their journey with nothing more than patience, care, and a gentle heart. And as the flight continued, the baby laughed and played, Malik hummed and guided, and Clara, filled with gratitude and awe, realized that true wealth is measured not by money but by the love, presence, and care we offer to others.